We will, today we'll have a meeting, one public meeting followed by our regular agenda with one item on the agenda. And I believe our clerk has some words of wisdom for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure how wise they'll be, but at least it's a little bit of added information for those who are joining us this evening and who may be watching at home. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's planning meeting. Mr. Chair, I can confirm that we do have quorum and we do have all of our committee members in attendance this evening. At this time, we are currently joined by Mr. Tim Park, who's the Acting Director of Planning Services, James Barr, Acting Manager, Development Approvals, Tim Fisher, who's a planner, Janice Grant, who is an intermediate planner. Blair Johnson is also joining us this evening as our meeting host. My name is Elizabeth Fawcett. I am the committee clerk for Planning Committee. We will be joined by John Henderson, who is the Housing Program Administrator. He should be joining us shortly. We also have in attendance currently 2 agents and applicants as panelists, and we have 2 members of the public who are joining us in the gallery at this time. So with that, Mr. Chair, I will turn it over to you to begin tonight's meeting.
Thank you very much. I'll begin with a fairly long notice of collection that we do at the beginning of every meeting. Personal information collected as a result of this public meeting and processes collected under the authority of the Planning Act and will be used to assist in making a decision on this matter. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form part of the minutes, which will be available to the public. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to the Director of Planning Services. The purpose of public meetings is to present planning applications in a public forum as required by the Planning Act. Following presentations by the applicant, committee members will be afforded an opportunity to ask questions for clarification or further information. This meeting will then be open to the public for comments and questions. Interested persons are requested to give their name and address for recording in the minutes. Interested members of the public can email the committee clerk or the assigned planner if they wish to be notified regarding a particular application. No decisions are made at public meetings concerning applications unless otherwise noted. This public meeting is held to gather public opinion. An exception to this rule, and there isn't an exception tonight, is combined reports, which consolidates the public meeting and comprehensive reports. These applications are deemed by staff as straightforward and routine. This business practice has been in place for a number of years and is received by the applicants as efficient customer service and effective use of committee time. Please note that staff use discretion in determining if an application can be a combined public meeting comprehensive report to expedite the approval process. Public meeting reports are provided to inform the public of all relevant information. Information gathered is then referred back to Planning Services staff for the preparation of a comprehensive report and recommendation to the Planning Committee. This means that after the meeting tonight, staff will be considering all the comments made by the public in their further review of the applications. When this review is completed, a report will be prepared making a recommendation for action to this committee. The recommendation is typically to approve with conditions or to deny. This committee then makes a recommendation on the applications to City Council. City Council has the final say on the application from the city's perspective. Following council decision, notice will be circulated in accordance with the Planning Act. If a person or public body would otherwise have the ability to appeal the decision of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston to the local planning appeal tribunal, but that person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Kingston before the bylaw is passed, that person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. So we will begin tonight. Our public meeting has to do with 1752 Bath Road, which is an Andrew Martin development. Elizabeth, is there anybody else from the public that has joined us?
FaceTime video.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. We do have Ms. Wortman here, who's going to be presenting to the committee this evening, as well as Andrew Martin, in order to answer any of the questions the committee may have.
Excellent. And I apologize for that very noisy interruption just now. My grandson was FaceTiming me, but he can wait. So, welcome, Ms. Wortman, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nancy Wortman, and I'm a planner with IBI Group. I'll just test. Can everyone hear me? Yes, yep. Perfect. So I'll be presenting the subject application for zoning bylaw amendment for the property at 1752 Bath Road on behalf of Andrew Martin. Next slide, please. So the site is located on the north side of Bath Road, pretty well across from Frontenac Secondary School. Next slide. In terms of the general area, north of the site is immediately the CN main line with industrial uses off of Development Drive to the north. To the south is Frontenac Secondary School, as I mentioned, as well as some commercial and residential development. And then east and west along Bath Road is generally commercial, with some commercial having accessory residential within it, as well as residential further to the east and west. Next slide, please. This is an old aerial of the site, since the building has since been demolished, but it has an area of 0.6 hectares, about 50 meters of frontage on Bath Road. And if you recall, it accommodated the McEwen Animal Hospital for a number of years. Next slide, please. So the proposal that we are looking at this evening is to construct an 8-story apartment building with 88 units. It's intended to be a mix of market rental and affordable units. 100 parking spaces are proposed in a service lot, as well as an attached parking structure behind the building. The parking structure is intended to have a garden terrace on the roof, as well as there'll be common indoor amenity areas and private balconies. Due to the proximity to the CN main line, there is a safety berm proposed at the rear of the property as required by CN. Next slide, please. This just gives everyone a quick summary, so I'll run through some of the stats for the site. As I mentioned, 8 stories is what we're looking at, 88 residential units, 20 supported affordable units, 8 affordable units, and 60 market rental units. In the next slides, I'll get into a bit more detail on that to give you some more information. Density for the site overall is 141 units per net hectare, which puts it into the high density residential category. In terms of amenity space, we're meeting the zoning requirement of 18.5 meters squared per unit. Landscaping on site will be 41%, lot coverage 30%, parking ratio of 1.15 per unit, and a indoor bike parking storage room with 30 secure spaces is proposed within the building. Next slide, please. I know there was some chatter before the public meeting started with the councillors looking for some more information on the proposed affordable housing component. So I'll provide you sort of with what I know, and then after I've given my presentation, if there's further questions, hopefully myself and Andrew can do our best to address them. But the project goal is to successfully bring affordable housing units to the market in the city of Kingston. This project did start four years ago. And in working with Andrew, I've learned there's a lot of variables and relationships and factors at play. So there's actually 4 key participants, which is adding to the complexity of the project. There's CMHC, City of Kingston. They're looking for a nonprofit organization. Previously, they had partnered with an organization and we're about to enter into a lease and an agreement with them, but unfortunately due to COVID and other challenges that fell apart. So they're currently looking for a nonprofit organization, and the City of Kingston is assisting with trying to find them someone that would be compatible with this proposal. And then of course we have the proponent, Andrew Martin. So as I've learned myself, the discussions are complex and ongoing, and they relate to funding, legal agreements, long-term commitments, short-term commitments, as well as financial viability of the project. CMHC will not review the funding application until the proposal is through the planning approvals process. So Andrew won't know if he has the funding or not at this point. So in light of that, and to be perfectly transparent, we're just reminding everyone that the subject application should be reviewed based on planning merits regardless of the tenant composition. Again, just restating with the intention being that we are able to make the affordable housing component happen. Next slide, please. In terms of some of the details about that, what will happen is Andrew's company will enter into a lease with a nonprofit organization to rent 21 bedroom units at a 60% CMHC average market rent. As I mentioned, he did have an organization lined up that he was working on a lease with, but unfortunately it recently fell apart. So he's now looking for a new organization. So the first 2 floors of the building will be allocated to this organization, and the units will be managed and rented through that nonprofit. It's the intention that these units be supported. So the nonprofit will have an office in one of the units to provide on-site support to residents. It's just like one of the units, it will be converted to meet the needs of the nonprofit as required. An additional 8 affordable units will be located throughout the building and rented at 80% CMHC average market rates, with the remaining 60 units just being regular market rate rentals. Next slide, please. So because Andrew's intention is to go after this affordable housing funding, CMHC grades applications based on several variables, which he's factored into the building design and purchase of the property in question. One of the variables being affordability, which I spoke to what the breakdown was going to be on the last slide. They also evaluate based on accessibility. And there's 2 different standards you can meet. And obviously the more you do, the greater chance of getting the funding and more funding that you have access to. So in this case, he's decided, worked with the architect to make sure that the entire project meets full universal design in terms of accessibility, so which far exceeds the OBC requirements. In terms of the next variable being environmental efficiency, again, he's worked with the architect to design the building to meet and exceed CMHC's base environmental efficiency requirements. For CMHC, it needs to be 25% lower in energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions compared to the national building standard. So these accessibility and environmental efficiency elements have obviously been designed into the building. So regardless of what happens with the affordable component, the intention is for the most part that even if it ends up being a market rental apartment, that those elements will carry through and be built anyways. The last element that CMHC looks at is proximity to amenities, and they have a checklist with certain distances from 1 kilometer to 1.5 kilometers, looking at where the site's located in proximity to transit, groceries, park, childcare, etc. And the site met actually all of those criteria except for one, which was it was not 1.5 kilometers away from a public library. It is in fact 5 kilometers. So in terms of proximity, it scored very well, which is why Andrew had purchased the site for this project. Next slide, please. Moving now to some more of the planning details in the concept plan. You have Bath Road on the right-hand side of your screen, and the I guess it'd be the CN main line right of way on the left-hand side. So you've got your 8-story apartment building with access off of Bath Road. You have a surface parking lot in the west side yard, as well as a 2-level parking structure located behind the building. And on the rooftop of the garden terrace, or on the rooftop of the parking structure, there will be a garden terrace for use by the residents, as well as additional indoor common amenity space. Next slide, please. These are the side elevations of the building. There you can see the parking garage a bit better. Again, it will be located behind the building, so it won't be visible from Bath Road. Next slide. The front and rear elevations of the building, with the image on the right-hand side being what will be visible along the streetscape of Bath Road. Next slide, please. As part of the planning report, we did complete an urban design review looking at the development in relation to the design guidelines for residential lots prepared by the city. And the apartment creates a more defined urban environment in the area. The design is supportive of SEPTED principles, or safety principles. As I mentioned, it will be universally accessible. The height and massing are similar to nearby development. The second image identifies, if you're familiar with the area, 2 8-story buildings just west on Canatera Court, as well as a large number of residential buildings up at the intersection of Bath Road and Gardeners, as well as other multi-story residential along Days Road as well. As you can see in the rendering, there is a variation in materiality and color, and high quality materials and finishes will be utilized, with part of that being required to meet the building efficiency requirements that Andrew's hoping to meet for CMHC. Next slide, please. So we're requesting a zoning bylaw amendment to permit the multifamily apartment dwelling and to establish site-specific performance provisions for it. Next slide, please. The planning application needs to be consistent with the intent of the 2020 PPS. In this case, it redevelops an underutilized site in an area intended for development. It's within the urban growth boundary. It efficiently uses land and resources, does not result in uneconomic extension of services. It's compatible with adjoining uses as demonstrated by the accompanying technical studies, and no public health and safety issues are anticipated. Next slide. Moving now to the local City of Kingston OP, the site is designated arterial commercial. High density residential uses are permitted in the arterial commercial designation, provided the tests of the OP are met, with the test being adjacent to residential area, adequate residential amenity, active transportation linkages, and as outlined in our planning report, the site does meet these criteria, as well as the high density residential locational criteria and the CMHC proximity to amenity criteria that I described earlier. Next slide, please. Just looking at some of the OP policies specifically, the site is compatible with adjacent uses. It is south of the industrial area off of Development Drive, but it does meet the ministry's D6 guidelines for residential uses and the minimum separation distance, and utilizes mitigation measures as described through the noise study that will be required to ensure compatibility. There are a mix of commercial and residential uses along Bath Road, including accessory residential within some of the commercial buildings. Mitigation measures are utilized as necessary. A detailed noise study was completed. And actually, even prior to submission, there was extensive back and forth with the City of Kingston, and it has already gone through a peer review process, or an initial peer review process. And as we move through the technical review process, it will obviously be reviewed in greater detail as well. The site meets the needs of its users, and it does satisfy the special needs facilities policies outlined in the OP. As I mentioned, based on who the previous partnership was with, the proposal would fall into this description. So in the event that another organization comes through with similar goals, we still speak to the policies. And again, the scale is appropriate. 20 of the 88 units will be supported, and the location is suitable in terms of commercial, transit, amenities, and access to other services. Will help the city achieve intensification targets, and it provides a visually compatible design. As mentioned, an urban design review was completed, and there are a mix of densities and heights in the area. Next slide, please. The site is zone C2 currently, so we're requesting a site-specific residential type 5 zone. Next slide. So some of the standards that we'll be, we've requested to amend within that new R5 zone is to permit the proposed community support office, reduce the minimum required lot area, which is on a per unit basis, a reduced east side yard setback, a reduced setback, from the CN rail main line, a reduced parking ratio from 1.25 to 1.15, adjustment of yards where parking is permitted, as well as privacy yards, existing driveway widths, and to increase the permitted projection for balconies into the east yard, given the reduced setback proposed. Next slide, please. So just to generally sort of summarize and speak to some of the reasons that the requested relief is appropriate. The Achiro commercial designation does permit residential development. The relief for the community support office has really been incorporated for clarity, with the office being located on the second floor. And again, it will just be one of the units that will then be converted to meet the needs of the organization who's operating. The lot area is sufficient to meet the needs of site users in terms of setbacks, unit sizes, parking, amenity, and safety. The east side yard and balcony setbacks are appropriate given the suburban/commercial context, and they are still a sufficient size to accommodate landscaping and access to that part of the property. The CN rail setback, which is 30 meters, in this case, because we have the parking garage at the rear part of the building, hence the request to reduce down to 12.5 meters. However, the residential component is greater than 30 meters. I think it's actually 48 and a half meters, which actually exceeds the requirement by CN. And this has been reviewed with CN, and as necessary, the safety berm will still be installed. And as long as residential development is outside the 30 meter setback, they are supportive of what we're proposing. In terms of the parking ratio, as I mentioned, we're going from 1.25 to 1.15, which we think is appropriate for the proposed unit type, as well as the mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units that the building will contain, and the proximity to transit, as it's in an area well served. And generally, overall, safe site circulation and access will be provided. Next slide, please. So to summarize, the requested amendment is appropriate in our opinion, as it's consistent with PPS policies, conforms to the intent of official plan policies, and is compatible with surrounding land uses. It's our opinion that it represents good land use planning and is in the public interest. On that note, if you want to go to the next slide, I'd be happy to answer any questions from the committee. And as mentioned, Andrew's here as well, and he may chime in if there's something he's better suited to answer.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Before we go into the committee, I'll just ask for, I believe it's Mr. Park, but whoever the city planner is, to comment on the public information notices. Yes, Ms. Grant.
Hi, Mr. Chair, can you hear me okay?
We can indeed.
Perfect. So just to confirm that notice was provided on this application in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, which includes on-site signage, a mail out, and a courtesy notice in the paper. To date, we have not received any public correspondence on this application.
Thank you very much. I will now turn to the committee, and we'll give committee members an opportunity to ask questions at this time. And then at the end of that, we'll move to the public. So, any questions from the committee? Yes, Councillor Hill.
Well, I just want to start by congratulating Andrew for this project. This is great. This is exactly what we're looking for in our community, and I hope it. I hope you're able to secure that that investor, that partner that you're looking for. But just the one thing that the setback for the rail line is really to the parking lot, isn't it? To the parking garage. And I think the residents in the building are actually quite substantially further back. Isn't that, am I correct on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay. The reason that I ask is, and I'm sure the other councillors who have any developments along the train tracks realize that as soon as people move into this building, we're going to hear from people complaining about the train whistle. I don't know if there's anything you can do about that, or any way, Andrew, you've considered in terms of alerting residents who are coming into the building to that fact. But I mean, we've not had any luck in terms of trying to get that whistle turned off, and I don't expect that's going to happen anytime soon. So I don't know if you have any comment on that.
Yes, go ahead, Andrew.
Yes, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, we have done a noise study, and that noise study has actually had an initial peer review, and there were sound mitigation measures that were brought to the forefront in these noise studies in this peer review. And some of these noise mitigations were actually the type of construction that this building should be constructed from, and it should actually have either a brick veneer or be built out of concrete, again for that acoustic barrier, as well as it was specified within that report that the windows meet a specific STC rating.
Great, thank you. Any further questions from the committee? Councillor Kiley and then Councillor Hutchison. Go ahead, Councillor Kiley.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you, a few questions actually piggybacking on Councillor Hill, and I'll also echo the comment that I'm very pleased with this project. I know Mr. Martin reached out to me as the district councillor early on, and I think this is exactly the type of development we want to encourage, density-wise, affordability-wise, and so forth. So my first question is about the viability if the CMHC funding doesn't come through. Obviously, again, like Councillor Hill said, we're hoping that it does. Could you comment on what happens if it doesn't?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's a great question. And the financial viability of this project, as I'm proposing it today, is definitely contingent on a successful CMHC co-investment fund application. And I do want to just make the comment that we have, I guess, designed this building in such a way so that we hopefully score as high a grade as possible on this application, so that when we finally do have this file adjudicated, that we will reach that funding that we're requiring for this project. In saying that, though, if the funding doesn't come through, yes, this project will have to be again looked at in terms of at least the affordability rates, and if that is going to be viable. It still is, I guess, our desire for this project to still offer at least some sort of affordable housing and still meet these accessibility as well as environmental efficiency standards. We are fairly far into the architectural drawings. We've also already started structural and mechanical drawings as well. So we, changing the design of this building is not in the best interest of us either. So those things will definitely remain. It would definitely be, though, the affordability portion and how we can still structure it to, bring those affordability levels, I guess, to the market. And there would have to be a conversation around that if we weren't successful with the CMHC funding.
Okay, thank you. If I could, Mr. Chair, through you, two more questions. And actually, your previous comment there, Mr. Martin, sets up my second one nicely, which is, if you don't get the CMHC funding, does that also mean that the potential partnership for supportive housing would be out of the question? I suppose it does, because it's related so tightly to the viability of the project overall.
Yes, and through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, that is correct. Obviously, the nonprofit organization is tied, obviously, to these supportive units. In saying that, it's more of a question of the actual rent levels than it is, having a partner with a nonprofit organization or not. It's more of a question if the rents are going to be at 60% or something higher.
Okay, that's totally fair. And like I said, I guess I can only speak for myself, but I definitely hope that comes through for you. Final question then is about the potential of having supportive housing on this site and the proximity to the rail line. I think that adds a layer of complexity to a simple request for change in the setback. If you have an elevated parking garage essentially abutting the rail line, I know there is the berm, but what I'm wondering is the berm going to be higher than the highest level of the rail line? And if not, what purpose does it provide in terms of safety?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, yes, the berm has to sit higher than the rail line. So yes, that will happen. Again, there has been a lot of sound, I guess these sound studies have shown ways of reducing the sound impact. So we are definitely going to be implementing those in the construction of the building to, again, ensure that the sound is mitigated as much as reasonably possible. The other thing, just in terms of location, this site was actually specifically, I guess, picked for this project due to its location and its proximity to different amenities, because again, the location of this site actually checks the box for every single one of CMHC's proximity to amenities requirement, other than, as Nancy alluded to in the presentation, the proximity of being 1.5 kilometers away from a public library, but it checked every single other box. So that is actually why partly this site was specifically picked for this development.
Okay, just a supplemental and clarification through you, Mr. Chair, kind of the same question. My concern about the parking garage was actually less about sound, because I heard your earlier comments about the design of the building and how that mitigates the potential for the noise to be bothersome, but more about the potential safety concern for folks who may be living in supportive housing, having a parking garage that's above the rail lines and much closer than normally would be permitted. Do you have any comment on that?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I definitely understand your concern. Again, we're going to be working with the CN rail line as well to make sure that we meet their standards for this safety berm. And CN has these standards for a reason, and I feel as though if we obviously meet these standards, which we will, it will be safe to have the parking garage in that location.
Okay, thank you so much. And again, hopefully that will come through for you.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can also just chime in and add that there is a rooftop terrace proposed on top of the parking garage, which does require extensive sound barriers. I can't remember their exact height, but I think recognizing your concern, I think that there will be a barrier on top of the berm as well as on top of the parking garage that would prohibit access to the tracks and provide that safety that we all would want at the site.
Yes, thank you. Good. That's very good.
Thank you very much. I believe I saw Councillor Hutchison's hand a minute ago. There you
Thanks.
go.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a couple. Okay, so it was interesting to learn that the long-term service provider is not secured yet. So a couple of questions on that. The arrangement, the agreement to have the service provider in the building, how long is that to carry on?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. So the affordability agreement that is tied to those 20 units being supportive is a 25-year agreement with the City of Kingston. So for my organization, we do not specialize in administering these types of supports. So that's why we will need a nonprofit service provider that does specialize in administering these supports to be there for 25 years.
Thank you.
Is it specifically, I have some follow-up questions. Is it specifically the housing subsidy administration that is the issue? I'm just wondering because there are other buildings in Kingston where Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation calculates the rents, but essentially the landlord is operating as usual. It sounds like this agreement is somewhat different. Could you explain that, please?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, I'm a little bit confused, to be honest, of the question. Are you referring more just to the supportive component and what part that nonprofit service provider will play, or?
No, I think I'm no. Okay, to be more clear, the service provider is actually providing a service to the clients that will be there, or the tenants that will be there, in addition to calculating whatever their housing charge is. So the deal is a bit more complicated than some that are exempt in the city. So I was just looking for a bit more information on that, if I got the concept correct.
Yeah, and through you, Mr. Chair. Like how this agreement would be set up is it would almost be like a co-lease with this nonprofit organization, and the rents would be again set to 60% of CMHC average market rent, and then that nonprofit service provider would then be responsible for filling, I guess, those 20 units. So the rent level would be set at that 60% average market rent, and then they'd be leased out actually by the nonprofit organization.
Good, thank you. So when would you need to know that the service provider is in place in order for the concept to work?
Yeah, and through
you want to build the building.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I understand the question, and we are already in talks with other nonprofit service providers that have shown interest in joining this project. Again, the financial viability of this project is still contingent on a successful co-investment fund application. And unfortunately, and it is a frustrating point, but CMHC won't actually adjudicate these files until you're through the planning process. So that is going to give us more clarity when, hopefully this project does get through that planning process, and then we can actually have an idea of the funding that's available. And, at that point in time, we will be able to make the decision of if this project is financially viable, or if we potentially have to, look at, doing something a little bit differently.
Right. Now, insofar there's a municipal capital contribution, assuming, I guess, in addition, as you said a couple of times, that the CMHC funding application also. That's good. That means I know what's going on. Will you be able to thereby, because of these contributions, be able to negotiate a lower mortgage rate? And is that part of the underpinnings of the lower rents?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. If you're successful, if you're a successful applicant for the CMHC Co-Investment Fund, they offer a low interest loan as well as sometimes a financial contribution. But again, it depends on the grading, because each application is graded a little bit differently, again, because each project has sometimes different outcomes. Like in this scenario, at this point in time, if we do have a nonprofit organization involved in this project and are offering supportive units, it does get you a higher grade on this co-investment fund. Again, because we've made decisions with the rent levels being at 60%, that again scores us a higher grade. And same with the accessibility and environmental efficiency standards and targets that we're trying to achieve. Again, those are all decisions that are made so that we achieve a high score on this co-investment fund.
Great. Thank you.
So, following up, I think this following up on a question by Councillor Kiley, just to be for clarity's sake, if the CMHC funding doesn't come through, or it's more got to do with the municipal funding. Is it possible that you will find that you don't need the municipal funding, not for this project, but for the building itself? Because the city's had a problem with this previously, not with your company.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, is the question more in terms of, like, again, I guess that would really depend on, again, the rent levels of the project still. In terms of what we're proposing today, yes, the municipal funding is absolutely necessary to make this project, again, financially viable, as well as having a successful CMHC co-investment fund application. So, unfortunately, I don't see any way of financially making it work as we're proposing it today without that funding.
Thank you.
Okay, fair enough.
Great.
I'll just say that I appreciate all the extra work you're having to put into this, and I hope it comes off. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other members of the committee? Yes, Councillor Rosanek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the applicant. Yeah, thanks for building this housing. Definitely all housing is really needed right now. Do have concerns with the railway track, but other houses are right along the track just as close. Looking at an aerial shot of the lot, I think in your tree inventory, the majority, like they're black locusts. Oh, yeah. Okay. That's good, Blair. I'll get to those trees in a second. So the Mr. Martin, so the trees that are right now along the railway track, right? Is that in the CN right away, or are they considered yours? And are you tearing them down to then build this berm? How does that work?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there are trees that are on the property 1752 along that kind of property line that abuts in CN Rail. So yes, there are definitely trees there, and to construct this berm, ideally I want to keep as many trees there as possible because it actually creates a bit of a visual barrier. It also helps with noise mitigation to some degree as well. In saying that though, my hands are kind of tied to, I guess, safety, especially with this berm. And, at the end of the day, CN will make the determination how this berm gets constructed. In saying that though, do I see the possibility to keep those trees with this safety berm? I don't really, unfortunately. But in saying that, we are planning to hopefully plant trees at least on this berm if we are able to, or at least close by, to make sure that we still have that visual barrier that, hopefully, again, provides a visual barrier, but also a bit of a noise barrier as well.
Okay, thank you. And then, yeah, Mr. Johnson, if you could put up that picture, that would be great. So at the front of the property, right, we know that the tree on the left-hand side there has already been cut down. It's a catalpa tree, and the other catalpa on the far east side, is there any chance to save that one, or is that one right now coming down?
Thank you, and through you, unfortunately, this is a very tight site. Whenever you're working with these infill projects, the site utilization is obviously very important, and I do believe that this tree will definitely have to come down. Again, seeing firsthand as well some of the root structures of these trees, I can tell you that that root structure spans very far and will definitely be within the building footprint.
All right. So for your landscaping plan, are you adverse to planting 3 catalpas as part of the trees? I saw the concept plan that you showed, Ms. Wortman, and it showed trees around the apartment. So can you ensure that some of the trees that are planted are 3 catalpas? Because they are, if you Google them, they're pollinator magnets, right? So those blooms are gigantic. Google Maps just happened to take the picture of the aerial shot. If you were to Google 1752 Bath Road right now, when those catalpas were in bloom, and those 2 trees were the prettiest sight all along that entire stretch of Bath Road, to tell you the truth. Those were the 2 prettiest trees along that ugly section of Bath Road that's mostly all concrete. And now they're both going to be gone. So if you could ensure there's 3 catalpas. I imagine too, in that picture that just showed up, there's a black locust tree immediately to the west side of the tree that you cut down in November, and that one's probably going as well. So that's where I got the 3 catalpa trees from.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, that's certainly something we can look at and speak with the landscape architect and arborist about, and I'm sure Andrew is amenable to doing that if it's feasible on site. And I did just want to say I apologize. I had uploaded the wrong tree inventory, so it caused a bit of a stir with all the confusion. So I think all the correct documents are up there now, and will be reviewed as part of the technical review. And just to add to what Andrew said about the berm, we haven't designed it yet. So as he mentioned, the hope is maybe there's opportunity to save that. And given that you've raised that point, we'll be sure to raise it with the project team so that can be, if there is opportunity, that can be given consideration.
Great, thank you. And just my last point also is just about the train. So the closest crossing there for all the counselors to know, right, is the crossing that's directly across from Frontenac Secondary School, right? It's a pedestrian crossing, but because it is an official crossing, the trains have to blow their whistle. So any train coming from the east going in the westbound direction, I believe by looking at the layout, that's probably right where they have the sign for the train engineers to blow the whistle. So we are going to get complaints because right now, there's not a lot of neighbors there. It's mostly commercial business, and the building that existed there was a veterinarian office. And now we're going to be putting like 80 units, could be 2 people per unit, so that's a lot of people that never used to live right there. And it's going to be right where the sign is for the train engineers to blow the whistle. And anyone can go into Elmwood or across from 4002 Bath Road, where there's another sign that says blow the whistle now for the Collins Bay Road crossing, and see how loud that really is. It's pretty loud. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. And is Vice Chair Kiley? I don't see him. Is he still on? If not, I'll ask Councillor Hill to be acting Vice Chair, so I can get in my 2 cents worth.
I
Thank you very
take the
much.
chair and I recognize you.
Thank you. A couple of things. First of all, Andrew, I want to thank you and your family, your dad. For over a decade now, we've had in our OP a wish list, but it's not a shall, encouraging developers to have 25% affordable housing in developments. And you may want to put this in your CMHC application. You will be the first private developer who actually achieves what is over a decade old goal with in our OP. So I want to thank you for that. Most of the other points I wanted to make, all of the tree ones are always covered by Councillor Osanek, and I appreciate that. But have trees on the berm would indeed act as a sound deterrent as well. So I appreciate that. I know this is a tight piece of property, but in the era of COVID, we've all become much more aware of green space. And I'm wondering what's the percentage of the footprint of the property? Will there be an opportunity through landscaping and that to have some green space that could indeed count as amenity space for the tenants?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so as you mentioned, the safety berm at the back obviously won't be, it is a large green space area, but it won't be accessible or utilized as amenity space. There is some green space along the east side of the building, which there will likely be some at-grade amenity space there. There is one large outdoor, or not large, there's one outdoor amenity area proposed kind of hidden behind the parking garage so that acts as a noise buffer. And then the garden terrace will occupy the whole parking structure, the roof of the parking structure. So, and that will be programmed accordingly. So, and then in addition, there will also be indoor common amenity space. So yes, definitely in light of COVID, I think there are a lot of amenity space options, sort of different options. So if there's people in one, you could go to the other. So yes, it is a tight space, but hopefully more has been provided than perhaps other sites have. So I think there's a good balance of indoor and outdoor space for the tenants to utilize.
Great. And I had another question that's having a senior's moment that just escaped me. Yeah, I'll come back to that afterwards.
All right. So, do you want me to return the chair?
Please.
I do so.
And I will open this up now for our public members of the public who may wish to speak to this. So the clerk will take over the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do still have 2 members of the public currently with us in the gallery. So I will ask, if you wish to speak during this time, please raise your hand in Zoom. This can be located at the bottom of the Zoom window when you move your mouse over the screen. We'll just give a couple of seconds, Mr. Chair, to see if there's anyone who wishes to speak. All right, Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any hands at this time, so I don't believe anyone wishes to.
Thank you very much. And my question has returned to me. Councillor Kiley, could you take the chair very briefly?
I do, and I recognize you.
Andrew, I'm just curious. I know that you mentioned the CMHC would be a 25-year commitment. The city usually seeks a commitment for a period of time when we help fund affordable housing. Do you anticipate the city portion to be a 25-year or longer or shorter period of time commitment?
Mr. Martin, you want to take that?
Thank you, and through you. So yes, I think there may be a little bit of confusion. So the agreement with the City of Kingston is actually for 25 years. CMHC, however, their agreement is actually usually only 20 years. They don't grade applications for having longer agreements than 20 years. And again, that was one sticking point that I've tried to kind of push on CMHC, because in this scenario, we're offering affordable housing for an extended 5-year period without receiving any funding for it. I've been pushing hard on CMHC to hopefully, make an exception, and unfortunately haven't really gotten anywhere there. Again, this, the project that we're proposing here, obviously it has a lot of, I'll call them social outcome goals of the project. And, we are hoping that, this project is successful, definitely over that 25-year period, but potentially even after that 25-year period, we hope that the agreement goes well and that there can be an option to renew.
Thank you very much. And I will mention, before any planners scold me, all these questions about your financing aren't specifically planning questions. So thank you for indulging those questions. When it comes time for the comprehensive report, those questions may come up again. But since the city is going to be a funding partner in this as well. So, okay.
Bill, the chair to you, Councillor.
Thank you very much. Before we call an adjournment, are there any city planners with comments, or are there any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, I will call this public meeting completed, and we'll turn now to our regular meeting. And thank you again to the Martins. I appreciate this project.
Thank you.
So, I'm sorry, Elizabeth, do I leave this and we come back, or do we just go on to the regular one?
No, Mr. Chair, you've called the public meeting closed, so you may start with the regular meeting by calling it to order.
Okay. So I will call the Planning Committee meeting to order. Approval of the agenda that's before us, if there's a mover and a seconder. Councillor Sanik, Councillor Hutchison, all those in favor? Carried. Confirmation of minutes, and we have 2 sets of minutes, April 29th and May 6th. We'll do those jointly. A confirmation of those 2 sets of minutes. Councillor Hutchison, Councillor Asanic. All those in favor? Carried. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none. We have no delegations. We have no briefings. I will read the business portion before we get on to our single item that's on the agenda. This portion of the meeting is open to the public. The city has initiated a new process in which members of the public will have the opportunity to speak for up to 5 minutes on comprehensive reports presented before the Planning Committee. Those wishing to provide oral comments at this meeting will be invited to do so. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Council or Corporation of the City of Kingston to the local planning appeal tribunal, but that person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Kingston before the bylaw is passed, that person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. And our comprehensive report that's before us has to do with 58 and 60 Yonge Street, and the applicant is David Crane. I will now turn to our planners who would like to speak to this file.
Yes,
Mr. Chair, it is Mr. Fisher on this file, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Fisher, the floor is yours.
Yes, through Mr. Chair. We have a zoning bylaw amendment D14025-2020 for the municipal address 58 and 60 Yonge Street. Next slide, please. So the purpose and effect of the application, the current lot fabric consists of 2 separate lots with each half of the existing semi-detached dwelling having separate and distinct title. The semi-detached dwelling consists of a total of 2 dwelling units with a total of 6 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms in either unit. The applicants propose to merge the 2 lots to create a single lot. The applicant is proposing to reconfigure the internal floor layout and construct an 84 square meter rear addition to the existing dwelling to accommodate 3 dwelling units. The 3 dwelling units will be divided horizontally with a dwelling unit occupying the 2nd floor, the main floor, and the cellar. The main floor unit will also occupy a portion of the basement of the addition and will provide a workshop, utility room, guest room, and a 3-piece bathroom in the basement. Next slide. The proposal will consist of 3 units with the basement unit containing 2 bedrooms, the main floor unit containing 3 bedrooms, and the 2nd floor unit containing 2 bedrooms for a total of 7 bedrooms in the new structure. The proposed 3-unit dwelling will increase the total bedroom count in the new structure from 6 to only 7 bedrooms. Next slide. The proposal will comply with the performance standards of the 1 and 2 family dwelling A5 zone in zoning bylaw number 8499. However, a 3-unit dwelling is not permitted or is not a permitted use in the A5 zone. So the applicant is seeking a site-specific A5 zone, which will permit a 3-unit dwelling as a use and recognize the existing lot area, which is 107 square meters for the 3 dwelling units. Next slide. The location of the property, as you can see, it is along the northwest portion of Yonge Street. It is right across the street from Portsmouth Olympic Harbor and just a stone throw away from King Street West. It is located on the outskirts of a residential neighborhood, which consists of quite a mix of residential housing, from one family to two-family dwellings, all the way to row housing, and also apartments complexes within the area. Next slide. This is a photo as it stands today. As we can see, it is your typical semi-detached dwelling with common party wall down the center, entrances or principal entrances within the front. Let's see here, and parking, as you can see, within the driveway, which leads to an existing garage in the back. Next slide. So the official plan, the subject property is designated as residential, as with the residential uses around, and across the street at Portsmouth Olympic Harbor, it is Parks open space. Next slide. So under the current zoning bylaw, which is 8499 for the city, the subject property and the surrounding properties are in the A5 zone, which is a 1 and 2 family dwelling zone. Next slide, please. So the proposed development, the concept plan, as you can see, the red outline is the property line of the combined properties. And the blue area is where the proposed addition would be located. And as you could tell, the addition will be at the rear of the dwelling, which you will not it will not be viewable from the street. So the streetscape really would not be changing in this case. The addition will be limited to a 1-story addition, which again would keep a profile quite low and would have minimal impacts onto the adjacent uses and also the continued residential uses or their future development as well too. Next slide. So the existing floor plans, as you can see on the main floor and second floors, again, your typical residential unit. You got your living space on the first floor and your bedrooms and bathroom on the second. Next slide. So the proposed floor plan of this of the 3-unit dwelling, as we can see, the basement floor plan within the existing building itself, we have the one contained unit. Within the addition area itself, that will be part of the main floor living space. So there will be a set of stairs from the main floor coming down, and that's where they would have an office and bathroom and access to outside. The main floor, as you can see, this would be the larger unit out of all 3. It will encompass the existing main floor plus also the main floor of the addition itself. Next slide. So the second floor plan, again, is only the existing upper floor of the existing dwelling. Again, the addition is only going to be a single story, so there's no additional second story living space on the addition. Next slide. They did give us some renderings of what it could potentially look like. Again, we see the existing structure on the upper left-hand side, and you could see a little portion of the addition in the back. And then again, on the right-hand side, you will not see the addition. And then looking at the rear of the dwelling, the addition itself will be a lower profile than the existing dwelling. And again, it will not be viewable from the street. So that, again, the streetscape will not be altered. And I can also say that the proposed addition and the structure itself, the massing and the proposed use is in character with the existing residential neighborhood, and it's built character as well too. Next slide. So during the public correspondence and the public meeting, which was held on March 25th, 2021, there was only 2 questions that were brought up only during the public meeting. And one was there going to be any trees removed on the site? The applicant did respond to this and say that there may be the odd tree removed to accommodate the addition. However, his intent is not to have any major vegetation removed. There was also just a general question at the time regarding the deck at the back, and they just wanted to see the deck profiles themselves. So next slide. So the zoning provisions that we're going to be, or that are proposed to be altered here would be the permitted uses under section 11.2, which currently only require, only permit a 1-family and 2-family dwelling. And they are proposing a multiple family dwelling containing 3 units. In doing so, we should be recognizing the square footage for each, the square meters or lot area of each individual unit as it's defined in section 11.3E, where it talks about each unit having a minimum amount of lot area. So in this case, we're looking at 269 square meters for each individual unit. That would accommodate the, I believe it was the 807 square meters that the subject property would be. And again, we would, or the planning department would recommend providing a maximum number of bedrooms to 7 in this case to reflect the applicant's proposal. We did speak to the applicant, and he was in favor of this limitation for this development. Next slide. So the proposed 3-unit residential development is appropriate and adds a range of built form and dwelling unit sizes available in the area. The proposal contributes to increasing the total residential density within the urban boundary. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment complies with the provincial policy statement, the official plan, and constitutes as good land use planning. And staff recommends approval of this application for zoning bylaw amendment for the property. Next slide, please. So if this application to rezone the property to a site-specific A5603 zone is approved, the applicant is then required to obtain a building permit prior to the commencement of any work. I will leave this in your hands, and I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fisher. I will now go to the committee. Are there questions from committee members? Seeing none, I will now open this up to the public. Elizabeth, are there any members of the public that would like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do still have at least one member of the public with us this evening. So I will just ask if they wish to speak at this time on this application, if you could please raise your hand in Zoom. Again, you can locate that at the bottom of your screen. We'll just give a couple of seconds to make sure that they're able to find it. And Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any hands at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. I will go back to the committee, and if I don't see any hands, I'll ask for a mover and a shaker for the recommendations. Who would like to move this? Councillor Hill and Councillor Sanik will second. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? and it's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. So, I'm going to go back to the agenda or I'll forget something. We have no motions before us. We have no notices of motion. I don't believe we have any other business. I don't believe we have any correspondence. And the date of our next meeting is May 27th at 6 p.m. And I believe that's to review some, or bring us up to speed on some of the new comprehensive plan. Is that correct, Mr. Park? I believe that's the case. So, but we'll get an agenda tomorrow on that. Oh, there's Mr. Park.
Through you, Mr. Chair, you are correct.
Okay, that doesn't always happen. Thank you. So I will now, I'll accept a motion to adjourn. Councillor Hill is always first off the mark. Seconder, Councillor Kiley, all those in favor? Good meeting, everybody. Thank you very much.
Go Leafs. Big night.